Futures Edge podcast, Finance Unfiltered. Also, a co author along with Jim Iorio, who is not here, which is actually an absolute joy for me to not have Jimmy here. Co author along with Mike Arnold of the Unfiltered Investor newsletter. You can get that on unfilteredinvestor.com. Also, before we begin, I want to thank our sponsor, Independent Arc Farms, grass fed, grass finished beef, organic, free range, GMO free eggs. Some of the best meat I've ever had. I just had some, Paul, before I introduce you, I just had some breakfast sausages that were 100% grass fed beef. And they were just out of this world, like every bit as good as the kind of pork sausages you buy in the frozen crap grocery store aisle. And just out of this world flavor and not all the grease, even though it is a fattier cut of meat that makes this. So just out of this world. Reach out to Marco. Also, Marco wanted me to tell you guys that if anybody wants to pre-order pork or goat meat, you can email Marco and his team at independencearc@gmail.com. The promo code FU, which is not what you think it is, it's Finance Unfiltered. That promo code will get you 10% off. I think in the past we've mistakenly said 15% off, but it's 10% off, which is still unbelievable when you look at the price of meat. The more the meat goes up, obviously the bigger that discount gets on a dollar basis. So Independence Arc Farm, some of the best meat I ever had. Marco and those guys are great. You complain about the big food conglomerates and about how bad the food is that you're overpaying for at a grocery store. Support independent farms and reach out to Independence Arc. Paul, how are you? Paul Sipple, who is a recovering CPA and a forensic retirement consultant. Paul, it's good to talk to you, man.
It's great to be here. And I will say my primary food that I eat is grass-fed, grass-finished beef.
You know, it's crazy. You look at like one of the places you could tell the most is in the color of the fat.
Yes.
Because actually we have a mix of both in this house. I get all our grass fed from Marco at Independence Arc. By the way, that's ARK, not ARC. I actually, what do you call it? Voice texted it and it came out ARC. And I'm not even sure what the hell that means. But you look at the fat between grass fed and grain fed, and the color of the fat is unbelievable. It's my understanding, maybe you know a little bit about this, that more yellow colored fat has some sort of nutrients we're missing in the grain fed. Is that right?
I don't know specifically about the color, but I can definitely say, and it's not just grass-fed, it's the types of farms where the meat is grass-fed and grass-finished. They're also treating the animals better in other ways beyond just what they're giving them for food. And there's a doctor named Anthony Guston that goes into great detail about research studies about why meat that is grass-fed and grass-finished is typically nutritionally superior.
So before we go into the financial side of things, you do something with health and wellness, these dinners you have. Tell me about that.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. I've been hosting actually lunches and breakfast events as well, and dinner events on and off over the last 10 years, fairly regularly the last few years through a group I created called Community Dining. And believe it or not, the website is communitydining.com. And the whole mission is simply to connect people through shared meals that.
How did you get that web domain? That's unbelievable.
It was like 10 years ago, but even 10 years ago, like that's not an easy name to get. So I just thought it was cool. I'm a huge fan of Joel Salatin. You might have heard of him. And he talks about the value of engaging people in the means by which we fuel ourselves. So I use that in the tagline of the mission of what I'm trying to do. And it's a lot of fun bringing people together.
So where are you coming to us from?
I'm in Chicago. Not a lot of local I guess you call it local in Chicago. A farm local is like Wisconsin, Michigan,
It's funny.
Indiana.
You know, I lived in Chicago most of my life, right? And the last neighborhood I lived in was Pilsen. And always, you know, sort of I moved from developing it. Well, actually, you could see that now, right? That's the Chicago flag tattoo.
Yeah.
But I moved from one developing neighborhood to the next. And I always liked it because it was a little less, it was just a little more real to be in these developing neighborhoods. And I always told everybody, they don't realize this, man. You drive 45 minutes to an hour outside of Chicago, you are in the country. Like it's farms,
Yep.
It's not rolling hills, but
Right.
you go out to Wisconsin, you go out to like an Oswego or some of these further out places outside of Rockford. It's farms as far as the eye can see. It is Midwestern.
Yep. Yep, and there are some farms close by. I mean, we have a few farmers markets, and there's like a farm that's, I think 40 miles away. That's considered like super close. So
Yeah.
yeah, I even have a whole spreadsheet of regenerative farms. So that's how crazy I am.
So we both, before we go into a little bit more, where do you stand on the National Guard coming in? And I'll tell you a story. Before
Sure.
I moved to Florida, I left Chicago, and we actually spent the entire month of June during the pandemic down here in Naples, Florida. Friend of mine was down here, and he had said, "Hey, I heard you guys are closed. We're open. You can sit at a restaurant, eat outside. Nobody bothers you." So we came down and spent the month down here. Now, when we left, we used to hear about a gunshot a month, and they were far away. Okay. When we got back after spending the month of June 2020 in Florida, it was a gunshot a week, and they were close. And one day my wife walked our two dogs in the park across the street from our house in Pilsen and came back with a 9 millimeter shell casing saying to me, "Is this what I think it is?" And we left that October. So what has been your experience? I'm assuming you've been there a little while, right? What's been your experience then and recently?
Yeah, so I grew up in Highland Park, north suburb Chicago. If you're from Chicago, I'm sure you know Highland
Yep.
Park. It's close to Chicago, but it's certainly very different than Chicago.
Certainly
It's a
not
nice,
Chicago, but it's close.
yeah, it's a nice suburb in the, on the North Shore. And I've lived in Chicago in the Gold Coast area for almost 25 years. I've never really felt unsafe in my neighborhood. However, I will say that just a couple weeks ago, I had someone walk up to me and start like literally just try to pick a fight with me and say, "What are you looking at?" and actually punch me. And it was a little bit
Jesus.
shocking, but it was in broad daylight, so I wasn't particularly alarmed, but yet something
You
like
got
that
punched in the
shouldn't.
face. I mean, that's not fun.
Well, not it was punch in the shoulder. He didn't punch me in the
Oh,
face.
okay.
So
I thought it was in the
that is a
face.
big difference. I don't want to mislead anyone. So, question about the National Guard. I'd consider myself a hardcore libertarian, anarcho-capitalist. I don't like federal government intervention. So
Agreed.
I would still be against having the National Guard coming to Chicago. However, many people who are against the National Guard coming to Chicago are against it because they insist that there really isn't a crime problem in Chicago. Just because I'm against having the National Guard come in doesn't mean I don't also acknowledge that there's a serious crime problem and that we don't really have to get to the root cause of what's causing this crime problem in the first place. So it could be a longer conversation, but at least that's my short answer to the
Well, I'll
question.
give you, I have a potential because I feel the same way as you do with the National Guard. I still have a lot of friends and family in Chicago. Jimmy doesn't live in Chicago, but he's down there a lot for work. He lives in the suburbs. He's got a restaurant in the suburbs, but he still goes into the city a lot. And so there's a lot of people I care about in Chicago, which I'll include you in that now. I think we should handle it. The gang members in Chicago call it Chirac. And I think we should handle it the same way we've handled the interventions in certain countries, where we send special forces trainers to train the army and the police in these particular places. I'd like to see military trainers and instructors train the Chicago police in ways to control the crime. Now, I'm going to have people jump on me for that because it's obviously a little bit different. But I have a cousin who's a police officer in Chicago. He's sort of a second cousin. And the last time I saw him, which wasn't recently, he said to me, he goes, "It is not worth it for us to stop if we see a crime. We have to get a call. Because if we see a crime, we could be mistaken. And we go over there and we act with force, we get videotaped, not videotaped, taped with your phone. I'm still old enough where I
Yeah,
call it videotaping.
right, yeah.
But somebody records you and you lose your job and your pension because the wrong actions were recorded and reported." He said he was really grateful for the body cameras and the way that developed now in order
Yeah,
for police to be able to defend themselves. But
sure. I'll just add this one thing, and I'm not a criminologist. I don't know a ton about all the crime data, and who knows if we can even believe all the data. But at
right.
least from what I'm generally hearing in Chicago, there's a lot of people that continue to get released after committing violent crimes. And at
Yeah.
least we should have a conversation of why is this person still out on the streets? He's been in jail 4 or 5 times. He keeps being let out. There's a whole litany of violent crimes this person has committed. So maybe before we bring in the National Guard, I would hope we could examine our local crime policies and fix it at that level first before we get to this point.
And as a rule, I agree with you on the whole. federal government thing. I'm not a fan myself. So, um, all right. So talk about what you do. You call yourself a forensic retirement consultant. I want to understand that better because we had a little conversation, but certainly not enough for me to understand exactly what you do.
Sure. And I mean, this is a great opportunity to educate people. So I'm grateful to be here on this show because this is a term I coined simply based out of a need in the marketplace. And I'll back up just explaining, like, how did I even get started and why do I even call myself this title, forensic retirement consultant or 401k consultant in most cases?
Mhm.
And that's basically due to a conversation I had with a colleague initially who told me how you could look up the retirement plan tax forms online. I still remember this. This was 20 years ago, and I was just fascinated with the fact that this information is actually a matter of public record. But I didn't really know what to do with the information right away. So a few years later, I thought, it would be cool to start calling a few businesses and letting them know when I started to see really significant service charges that, in my opinion, were way out of proportion to the level of services that were required. Like, let's say you have a 401k plan and there's 10 people, and you see brokerage commissions every year of over $40,000 and it's escalating. Well, I thought I'd be a hero by letting these business owners know, but they kept telling me, "Oh no, I'm not paying anything." And or, "Oh, I'm fine because my friend takes care of it." Well, dude, it's your friend that's taking that money. I know he's taking care of it. He's taking care of it and then taking all that money right to the bank. And there's no invoice that's being sent. So not only do the employers not pay for these fees, but they don't even get an invoice to reflect the fees that the participants are paying. And because they've never seen an invoice, then in their mind, they've never actually paid a fee. And my claim that they're paying anything is illegitimate because who are they or who am I, some stranger, to tell them that there's all this money coming out of the accounts when their trusted friend or family member who's been working with them for 30 years has never mentioned anything to them about a fee, even though I'm literally staring at their tax form and they don't believe me. So as a result of all these calls and all these responses with the same message over and over, I'm not paying anything, I'm taken care of, I realized the entire industry was completely messed up. It was not a free market. It is not a free market because in a free market, buyers and sellers have equal access to information. The whole market is messed up, and there's nobody talking about transparency and free market capitalism in the 401k plan industry. And I thought, you know what? There needs to be a whole new profession and it needs to be called forensic 401k consulting primarily for these reasons. And I can elaborate more, but that's the gist of it.
So is it similar to obviously Robinhood was in the lead of this, and I've never thought this was misleading. I just thought people were uneducated, and this is going to be the comparison I make. You tell me if it's the same. Robinhood was the leader, and then basically everybody followed, where they say commission-free stock trading, but you're paying the spread, and the spread widens if you choose commission-free. It tightens if you decide to pay a commission, and that spread is actually what you pay. Is it similar to that? Or is it more nefarious, more complex? Because I've never thought Robinhood was being nefarious at all. They just decided to market it differently
Yes.
and put it in a way that people understood.
Yeah. And I'm ambivalent on Robinhood
Yeah.
personally, but it's the latter. It's not the same thing. It is more nefarious and it is more complicated. And I'll explain succinctly, and I'll at least try because it's never easy to take a complex concept and explain it to people that really never heard of anything like this very clearly. One way in which the whole industry could be changed overnight is the fact that these brokers' commissions are not required to be paid. You don't know you're paying them, so you never know to reduce or eliminate a fee that you never knew existed. But let me start with that. These brokerage commissions jack up the mutual fund expense ratio. So every mutual fund has an expense ratio, otherwise known as a management fee. But in many cases, there's multiple share classes where you can buy the same mutual fund, like with American Funds, as an example of a mutual fund provider, for 5 different prices. I've done a YouTube video. I'm the only one in the entire country who's ever done a YouTube review video of any of the 401k record keepers because most advisors don't even deal with 401k plans. And if they do, they only handle one or two. So they don't even have the knowledge, nor does it even occur to them to do a whole review video. Because, like, what's there to review? I'm one of the people doing this, so I'd rather not expose my own practices.
Hmm.
So American Funds has 5 share classes ranging from R2 through R6. And the reason that the R2 share class is the most expensive is because it has the highest ongoing commissions built in. 0.75 or 0.6%, depending on the platform that you're using, is paid to the broker. Now, this is not churning. This is what's called reverse churning. So the financial advisor typically on a 401k plan does literally nothing other than waiting for participants to call them. They get paid through the fund's management fee, a higher management fee because of the commissions that they have built in. And the R2 share class, for example, has the most commissions built in. As the account grows, they should be reducing their percentage, but they never do because they have no incentive to do so. And ideally, you should have the R5 or the R6 share class that has no commissions and forces the advisor to come up with a separate fee. So this might already sound complicated because people's eyes might glaze over, but to simplify it, you don't have to pay commissions. The record keeper facilitates the commission payment from the participants to the broker, and you can always change the share class at your discretion, and you never have to ask the broker's permission to reduce the commission payments. Ideally, you come to an agreement with the broker before you actually start working with them, but it doesn't work that way. You actually have to hire a second consultant just to figure out what you're paying the initial consultants.
So how would a consultant in this new industry that you've founded get paid? You just say, I will do this for X, Y, and Z, or I will do this for a percentage of the savings, or what?
Yeah, now that's also a really good question. Some people ask me, well, so Paul, do you get paid a percentage of the savings? I say no. I mean, if you are paying excessively with your internet bill and I tell you you might want to call and ask for a reduction, you don't have to pay me for that. You literally just did it yourself. I just said, go call and eliminate the fee. You can also negotiate the record keeper's fee, which is also based on a percentage, which you also don't get a bill for. You can't have that go down to zero, but you can always ask for a lower percentage, just like you would negotiate another bill that if there's a better deal out there, or you're just asking for a reduction. But here's what an advisor should be doing. You should actually be doing one-on-one meetings with plan participants and helping them retire. Like, for example, figure out how much they should save. Which fund should they pick? Which fund should be available in the plan itself, which is how advisors market themselves, but that's at least one function. It's usually a bunch of basic index funds that a fifth grader could pick. How do I figure out how much to put in a Roth versus a traditional 401k? Most people don't even know there's a Roth component because they think it's an IRA, and it has nothing to do with 401k or IRA. It just means contributing with after-tax dollars. How do I develop a budget? How do I use the record keeper's retirement plan calculator where I can enter in my data and figure out how to retire? These are the basic questions an advisor should be going over with plan participants, and an advisor has a right to get paid for his or her time. And the way you should charge for that time is a fixed dollar fee, ideally billed to the company on a quarterly basis. So everything's out in the open and you can't really be fooled by what the advisor is charging because you're actually sending an invoice. Even if it's the participants who are paying it, you should still be sending a bill regularly so the plan sponsor, the owner, knows what you're charging and what you're doing.
So we're talking about this openly, right? And we're talking to our audience, and our audience it varies between big and huge. Who should be listening to you? Is it the person running the company that administers the plan, or is it the person who is benefiting from the 401k that the company offers, or both?
Yes, it's absolutely both. And I'm going to give another example. It's especially professional, small 401k plans. The really large plans, like if you work for Boeing, your costs are going to be almost nothing per person because the economies of scale dictate that the costs are just minuscule. If it's a smaller plan, the cost per person are typically astronomical. And this is going to be very important for the people with the most money in the plan. So that could be the person running the plan, the owner of the business, or it could be someone that's been there for many years, that's been contributing all this time. And this broker that's getting all those commission payments the brokers are passing on their fees in proportion to the account balances. So the people with the most money and who've been in the plan the longest are paying the largest share of those fees. But here's where it gets crazier. The fees aren't even tax deductible at the participant level. You never want to miss out on a tax deduction, but if you're paying at the employer level as a business expense, you're not only going to be more cost sensitive, and we can talk about Milton Friedman's chart, the 4 ways to spend money, and why it incentivizes people to engage in behaviors that are morally hazardous, but you're also going to get a tax deduction when you're paying at the business level like you would any other business expense. So if you're the owner of a small law firm or a medical practice where the contributions are huge, the balances are very large, and the number of participants are very small, you're the one who's getting hosed the most, whether you're a participant with a large balance or you're an owner with a large balance where you could have been paying at the company level, saving everybody money, getting like an indirect match because every dollar you're contributing is a dollar that otherwise would have been subjected to about 1% in fees. And then you're developing a valuable recruiting tool because 99.9% of small business plans are not only passing on fees to participants, but significant fees. So you can save your participants hundreds of thousands of dollars over time if it just occurs to you to pay at the employer level.
So what's the incentive for the individual then, and where do they go? Like, let's say that I know someone, and I mean, I do, someone who's in a large company driven 401k plan, and they're, what do you call that period of time where they can change their allocations? Oh God, that name escapes me right now. Anyway,
Brokerage.
enrollment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Enrollment.
So the
Okay.
enrollment period's coming up, and this particular person is fully contributing to the maximum, getting the match, the whole 9 yards. What's the like, how does that particular person, in your view, approach it and say, look, I heard about this guy, Paul Sipple, he does this stuff. Is that individual going to be, a sort of a shit stirrer at work? Or
Yes.
is that, yes. So that who's gonna like who's not gonna who's gonna get cut out down the line? Like who's getting cut out? The person who, or the group who is running the plan. It's not going to be the main corporation. It's not going to be the people who are in the 401k.
Yeah, oftentimes, and this is where it gets dicey because if you're a participant that's been there a long time, it depends on your relationship with the owner. It depends on how intimidated you are to ask. If you don't understand even what you're asking, you're not going to confront the employer. But oftentimes, it's like the friend or a golfing buddy or a relative of the owner of a company or one of the partners of the law firm. That's
Yeah.
where it really gets corrupt. Because look, I tell people if you're working with your buddy and your buddy's getting 40 grand a year in commission payments to do one meeting and nobody ever calls them. And by the way, nobody asks, the businesses never ask if the advisor is actually meeting with the participants. What do they care? Because they're not paying for it in their mind anyway. So who cares if the advisor is actually fulfilling their obligations and
But you're saying
justifying
they
their
are paying for it, right?
yeah, and they all are paying for it through the nose, through their accounts in ways that they just don't understand. I had a client who the only one I fired because he wasn't using me, he was paying 11 grand in commissions. That was 1% of a $1.1 million account. And I offered to charge him because there were only 4 people in the plan, a $2,500 fee to be paid to the company level. He said, Paul, $2,500 is a lot of money. I'm getting everything for 1%. Not only was he paying 11 grand, but he wasn't even deducting the expenses. So I told him, hey, you might as well pay 2,500 instead of the 7,700 that you're paying because he had 70% of the balance. So 11 grand, 11 times 7, 7,700. That was his share of the fees, but he couldn't do the math in his head. So it just baffled him. And I want to add something else is even the guy who invented the 401k, his name is Ted Benna. He's echoed the exact same criticisms as me. The advisors are getting paid as if they're doing an original piece of work, which is just bizarre and inefficient. They need to get back to a fee-for-service model like accountants and attorneys and simply focus on helping people retire. These fund lineups all look the same. They're all a bunch of index funds, and I like index funds. They never have gold or silver, and we can talk about that too, as to why the 401k plan is I don't know how much total money is there, $1 trillion market that has less than probably 0.1% invested in assets like gold or silver. And it's a huge missed opportunity. But Ted Benna has basically said that the whole industry is drastically overpaying advisors and record keepers. They should all be getting a fixed fee. Ideally, the employer should be paying for it. And ideally, you should be getting a tax deduction. And because the fund lineup is so simple, and because it takes almost no work or expertise or skill to select and monitor a bunch of index funds like the S&P 500. The advisors aren't just getting overpaid, they're getting drastically overpaid, and they're falsely marketing their services as though they're managing an account when in reality they're not doing any managing, especially because the accounts are actually participant directed and the advisor doesn't make any buy sell decisions.
So is there a way for individuals to opt out of this? In other words, can they go and say, look, I'm doing self-directed and that cuts out the advisor?
Sometimes. Another very good question.
It
This is
should
where
be all the time.
it should be all the time. So in some of Fidelity's plans, there's a fund called the Fidelity Spartan Fund where they have what's called unequal revenue sharing payments, where Fidelity, and I don't know if they're all their plan, but they always used to be structured like this, where different funds had different levels of kickbacks known as revenue sharing to pay for Fidelity's record keeping and administration services. Sometimes there's an advisor, sometimes there isn't. But if the participants choose the Fidelity Spartan Fund, that particular fund did not have any revenue sharing. So basically, what it means is they're sort of opting out by choosing that particular fund and not having to pay the record keeping and administration services. Another way to opt out potentially is if there's a self directed brokerage account, which opens up the entire universe of investments to all participants if they know it exists. So if you opt for that self-directed brokerage account, you can avoid paying the record-keeping advisory and administration fees. However, you might be charged anywhere from $50 to $400 a year in an annual fee that's required to be paid if you have one of those self-directed brokerage accounts. And it depends on which company you're using. But if you're an attorney and you're using the American Bar Association's retirement funds program, you can put 100% of your money into that account, and some of these providers limit it to 50 or 75%, and there's no annual fee. The only restriction is you have to have $2,500 in what's called one of their core funds, which is very limited. So in that case, you can basically opt out, not pay any fees, and you're good. Or the employer can add a self-directed brokerage account to allow you to opt out if they don't already have one, if a self-directed brokerage account is even offered. And companies like Guideline and I think Human Interest, and until 2023, John Hancock offered one of those accounts, but they don't offer that anymore. This is why it gets so complicated, because it all depends on the service provider.
So for the most part, unless an employer, and you correct me anymore I'm wrong here, unless an employer goes, hey, I really want to look into this, an employee is basically, because obviously everything comes down to the end consumer at the
That's
end of the
right.
day. The people who are in the plans are getting a lower return because the person who is administering the plan is paying fees they didn't need to pay. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Sometimes, based on how the plan is set up, there are ways as a participant for you to opt out. But a lot of times you can't if the employer won't do anything. I mean, look at the match. I mean, you want to get the match, and oh well, as long as I get a match, I'm happy. But the answer should be no. I want to get a match and not pay those additional fees, because you can't just say I'm not going to take the match, pay me a bonus. Employers, they usually don't do it that way. So you're kind of stuck. And all I really want to do is arm participants and ideally employers, but participants with enough knowledge so they can politely confront their employer. They don't have to be very confrontational, but the employer, if they actually knew, might even agree. So you shouldn't necessarily shy away as a participant if you're being especially affected, uh, mentioning any of this to your employer.
So who is your ideal client? Like who comes to you, or rather, who do you find and you go, look, you're paying this fee. Is it a large company? Is it a small company? Is it an individual who says, hey, I heard you on a podcast. I want to know more how the plan that I'm in could get better?
It's anyone with a handful, 5, 10 employees to several hundred. I mean, once you get over 1,000 employees, there can still be very large fees, but the fees per person are much lower. And I can certainly work with those companies too. I mean, and I would charge a bigger fee because my fees are based on how many participants there are in the plan, and the number of participants dictate and drive the amount of work that you're doing. But the more overcharged a company is getting, uh, the more important it is to understand what I'm telling them. And the more overcharged they are is because they're not seeing any of the fees, and that's because they're passing it on to the participants. This is especially true of any professional service firm, because those are the firms that are making the most money. The more money you're making, the more contributions there are, and the more assets there are. And as a result, the more disproportionate the fees are to the level of services being provided.
I wanted to take a little bit of a side road here. Obviously, these what are you calling them? Advisors, these plan advisors. Is that particular job likely to be replaced with AI? And if so, do you think the fees continue?
Sort of. There are companies that are, I guess, somewhat competing with advisors, although you can still have an advisor with Guideline. Guideline has grown quite a bit.
Tell people
It's
what guideline is, because there might be a couple of
Guideline is a 401k administrator and record keeper, and they have a separate custodian. I can't remember who the custodian is. And I mean, they've been around, I don't know, 8 to 10 years, and they charge very low, flat per participant fees for what's known as 401k record keeping and administration services. They have a very restricted fund lineup, and they are not really suited for plans that have complex needs, but it's very automated. There's a manage it for me option, and a lot of small companies that don't have a lot of employees or assets will go direct to a firm like Guideline and not use an advisor because the whole service and system is so automated. But these larger plans, especially with law firms, when there's relationships with advisors in place, I don't think that's really going to change for most of the money, because a lot of the money that's being moved is driven by advisor relationships.
Well, you keep bringing up law firms. Is that like a place where you've seen this very rampant and you feel like they should know better? Or why do you keep bringing them up?
Yeah, I bring up law firms a lot for a couple reasons. One is, I mentioned, is because they have a lot of money. They typically are putting a lot of money in as a profit sharing contribution and as a 401k matching contribution, and the participants are contributing quite a bit, which again jacks up the assets, which increases the fees. And what they don't know about is there's this amazing program which cuts out the advisor, to your point, called the American Bar Association's Retirement Funds Program, that's essentially self-managed. There's a small list of core investment options. There's a lot of those plans that do have that self-directed brokerage account option, and you can have any funds you want and essentially avoid all of the costs of the program. If you're a smart law firm, 10, 20 people, and every single person opts out of the core funds and puts their money into the self-directed brokerage account with only $2,500 being required in those core funds and no annual fee, you're essentially eliminating all of the advisory, custodial, record keeping, and administration fees that you would have otherwise had to pay. And it's often over $100,000 a year as participants in a law firm. There's a potentially small administration cost for a service called cross testing. It's not important to get into that right now, but that's partially why I say law firms. Medical practices as well. If you're a participant in a medical practice, oftentimes it's a friend of the doctor, and especially the law firms, though, because there are so many attorneys, in my experience, partners at law firms, that do business based on personal relationships that they have, or someone referring business to the firm. And as a result, their fees and their services do not get even remotely scrutinized. And that money just keeps coming out of the account with zero accountability to the advisor.
Is there an advantage? I mean, what's the advantage to being in a corporate 401k other than the match?
I
Nothing?
mean, the advantage if it's a large corporate 401k plan along with the match. I mean, anybody can give a match, is the fact that it's so large that your fees are extremely small.
Mhm.
But no, there's
Not according to you. I mean, granted, they're charged to the administrator as opposed to you, but they're subsequently charged to you, right?
yeah, and what I mean, the per participant fees, let me clarify. If you're at a
Okay.
company that has like 500,000 employees, yes, the overall total fees in absolute dollars are very large, but the fees charged per participant are, next to nothing. They're very, very small. It's the smaller firms. I mean, that really get treated unfairly. I'm telling you, like, there's lawsuits that happen with the larger firms because there's enough money in it for the attorneys as a result of like an extra $30 per person being charged above and beyond what a competitive provider would charge. The sad thing is the smaller firms, they're so small that no attorney is ever going to touch the plan, but there's often $2,000-3,000 per person in additional unnecessary fees charged every single year, and they're never going to get sued because there's just not enough money in it for the attorney's time to be worth it.
What's the biggest struggle you have talking to people about it? Is it that thing you've been mentioning that it's a friend that he's a friend of mine and I'm sure he's fine? Or I think when I talk to people, Jim has had this experience too because he's talked about it a lot. And anybody that's in the sort of role that Jim and I are in, where both of us have been. Jim, I think, has been in the market 34 years. I've been in 32 or 33, and people will come up to us and say, "Hey, can I show you what my plan has me in, and you tell me what you think." And both of us can look at it and go, yeah, the gold is pretty good. I would up that a little bit. And you should probably get out of the tech stocks. You're in your mid 60s, maybe
Right.
curb that a little bit. We have no problem doing that. Neither one of us are financial advisors, nor are we trained as such. But the biggest problem that I have when I talk to people like that is I say to them, when's the last time you talked to your advisor? Hey, he calls me once a year. He sends a Christmas card.
Right.
That they don't seem to understand that's their employee. It What do you find in talking to these business owners you're talking about with employees from 20 to 500 employees? Is it that same thing? Is that they don't understand that the advisor is actually their employee?
Well, yes, and it's often worse. There are situations where the advisor has made hundreds of thousands of dollars over time. And I'll give you an example of a defined benefit plan where this happened, and they don't even know they have an advisor. This is a $15 million plan with a few hundred people. And yeah, I'm not going to, I won't mention the name.
No,
And
but this is a
this,
real story you're
it's a
telling.
real story. Oh yeah, this is real. The advisory firm is getting about 44 grand in compensation, which if you're actually spending a lot of time in developing a customized allocation for a plan with $15 million in it and about 300 people, you could justify that fee. But this guy didn't even know the advisor existed. And I looked at the funds because you wouldn't believe, but the funds actually show up on the 5500 form, which is the form filed, the tax form filed with the Department of Labor for plans over 100 participants. And I looked every year, like years back, and not only were all the funds very generic, but they didn't change. And if the advisor wasn't talking to the employer and wasn't changing the funds and just selected a generic list of funds, then they were essentially fake managing the plan to the tune of over 40 grand a year.
Have you gotten any sort of like blowback I'm sure you've had clients, you've been doing this, what, you told me 16 years?
Yeah.
Have you got any blowback from the plan administrators or advisors, I should say, when an administrator changes and said, "Look, I'm changing to someone else, or changing to another structure where I don't have to pay these fees"? Have you got like death threats and shit?
I was threatened actually years ago.
Was it the
Um,
guy on the street in Chicago the other day?
it could have been his relative for all I know. Maybe it's karma. It might have come back to haunt me somehow.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, he just got all bent out of shape. And the story is that, I knew who this guy was because I'd had a conversation with him regarding one of his clients. And it wasn't that long ago, but he didn't remember. And he sent me a nasty email saying, I heard you're telling my clients you know me. When you don't, a liar is not a fiduciary. Does your little shop even have a compliance department? We're going to find out. And I had to tell him because he doesn't realize that I take notes on every one of my conversations. I told him the date and the time we talked, the phone number he called from, and what we talked about. And he was forced to apologize. That was the only time. And then a sales manager from John Hancock regarding that same plan, because John Hancock was involved in excessive fee lawsuits. I'm not afraid to say it because, I mean, this was a fact. And that was actually why I became a forensic consultant. That caused me to leave my firm because my compliance department got a call from John Hancock letting them know about the criticisms I was making. And my old firm had a relationship with John Hancock because many brokers, advisors will only be able to work with record keepers that their firm has a relationship with. And because of my firm's relationship, I was told I couldn't criticize that firm because they were working with them. And that's actually what prompted me to go off on my own, kind of like people at Substack. Like I'm no Matt Taibbi, but he's the largest, probably most prominent independent journalist.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
he left Rolling Stone because he just wanted to get paid by his subscribers and not really have his strings pulled. Or Alex Berenson is a really good example, or Barry Weiss. Whether you agree with him or not, I like the Substack model. And, that model really resonates with me.
I got a question from Tim, who's my newly thin friend as he changed the way he ate. He says, and you could say you don't want to respond to this, but I think you're capable of responding to this
I
particular
see.
question. Any thoughts of private credit entering the 401k world? He says it seems like this could be a way for the large asset managers to offload bad credits to novice investors. You have any sort of view on that?
Actually, speaking of Matt Taibbi, I think he might have raised some of those concerns just about private credit. I'm not that concerned though, because people have to understand that the concerns about private credit are unfounded. They're in a 401k plan. There's a list of default investment options, and only I would think in order to offer any of these private equity type investments in a 401k plan, it would have to be through some kind of a separate account, a brokerage account. Only a
Mhm.
very small percentage of 401k plans even offer the brokerage account alone, let alone these private equity investments, and they still are going to have very high minimums. So
Mhm.
there's a very small percentage that have these brokerage accounts. And of those who are going to offer these private investments, an even smaller percentage of the 401k plans are even going to wind up offering those investments. They're going to have a litany of paperwork. They're going to be probably a nightmare or at least very cumbersome to administer and to offer in the first place. And the only people that are going to invest in these investments are people that really want them badly, that are willing to jump through all these hoops. I think people have this idea that someone with $50,000 and that's all they have for their retirement is going to put all their money into some kind of a private credit fund. And, that's just not realistic.
Okay. Um, I want to, before we get done here, I want to make sure I do this because sometimes we leave this for the end and I don't feel like it's really fair. If you're piquing someone's interest that wants to reach out to you for one reason or the other, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Oh, just go on my website. My contact information is there. It's just my name, paulsipple.com, Sippil. And you can easily find me on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. Just type in Paul Sipple into YouTube, or it's just youtube.com / at Paul Sipple.
So, considering that you mentioned Milton Friedman, and my favorite of those all stars is Thomas Sowell, who basically was
Oh
a
yeah.
student of Milton Friedman. What is your thought of what's going on now in the overall landscape of things? This sort of Trumpian Besant view of the economy and how it's going to be a struggle at first. Labor market's definitely softening. How do you feel about the direction that the fiscal policy has gone? It's always been my contention that the president gets too much credit and too much blame. But this particular president is very active and will likely, in my view,
Right.
deserve the credit or deserve the blame. You have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I think Trump, from an economic perspective, is particularly scary. And that doesn't mean that I like the other administration.
No, of course not.
I'm a small government guy. I understand that the more government investments you have, the more crowds out private investments. And we're losing, well, capitalism has been slowly eroding, but it's eroding even more quickly.
Mhm.
Trump, as a backlash to the previous administration's policies, has not led with capitalism. He's led with more government, just government in the way that he wants to use it. So now, at least, in prior administrations, I mean, Republicans never really supported capitalism either, but they did a little bit. And now Trump has dropped any pretense of supporting capitalism. So now it's just these, fringe lunatics like me that talk about gold and silver and the people on podcasts are the last refuge of capitalism, the last defenders of capitalism. And that's what we need is people with that type of viewpoint, guys like Peter Schiff or Rick Rule. I mean, there's so many great people out there that are defending capitalism and explaining how important it is to protect your dollars from eroding through commodities, precious metals like gold and silver.
Yeah, Rick's a great one. I'll push back on Schiff though, because Schiff to me is the metals version of the Bitcoin people.
Yeah,
Where,
yeah,
and I'm actually speaking at a Bitcoin conference as the con, with the pro and con, which, I'm not really negative Bitcoin. But what I am negative is that this is the only thing you should be in. This is the only thing that works. And back to your Trump thing, this is the first time I ever voted for Trump. I just felt like, it was almost like a Tina situation, right? You either vote for Trump or you're really in trouble. But he's disappointed me, number one, in the Intel thing. The Intel thing really bothers me.
yep.
It's like instead of eliminating the subsidy is now in exchange for ownership of the company. That just eliminate them. Let companies fail, let other companies rise. That's the way it should be. So he's disappointed me. If the election were held today, I'd probably still vote for him. If it was against Kamala Harris, I'd probably still vote for him. But not because he necessarily, after with the knowledge that I have now, is not necessarily as capitalistic and libertarian as I'd like him to be. But the previous two elections, I voted for the libertarian candidate almost as my own little private protest. I
Yeah.
didn't want people saying to me, "You didn't vote, so you can't say anything." Which, first of all, fuck you. But second of all, um, I want to make sure that I can always carry that card out. So,
Yeah.
again, tell everybody where they can find you. We're just about ready to wrap it up here. So, tell everyone again, loud and clear. Want to make sure that people can reach out to you and at least talk to you. And again, talk to your program managers, talk to your advisors. They work for you. Don't be afraid to say, explain this to me. I had a conversation with a family friend recently. He's like, "Yeah, my guy's not doing so great anymore. What's he doing?" I don't know. You shouldn't do anything with somebody who can't actually explain it to you in plain English. Where can everybody find you?
My website, paulsipple.com, paulsippil.com, or just find me on YouTube. Either way, it'll be very easy to reach out to me and see a lot of the content.
Everybody who's watching, thank you for being here. Jimmy would say he misses you guys if he had any feelings, but he doesn't. He's got no feelings at all, no heart. Thank you guys for watching. Though seriously, without you guys, we wouldn't be doing this. Obviously, we don't make any money off this show yet, but we just enjoy talking to you guys. We enjoy the interaction, the questions that come in, the comments on X, the comments on Rumble. We love all this stuff, really. And go visit Independence Arc Farms. That's ARK. Reach out to Marco, grass-fed, grass-finished beef. We complain about it. Paul talked about it. You got to eat healthier meat if you're going to be one of those people that eats meat. You guys know that's all I eat. So Marco's been a big help to me being able to eat all the meat that I want to eat. So reach out to him. And if you want goat meat, if you want to pre-order goat meat, reach out to Marco. Marco, thank you for being a sponsor of ours. Paul, thank you, man. It's been a joy to talk to you. We'll have you on again soon.
Thank you. It was great to be here.